Hello everybody, I'm Dr. Deanna Minich. I am a teacher, a clinician, and a researcher in nutrition. And I'm here today to talk with you about the rainbow diet. How do you eat foods that are colorful, and what are the benefits of those colors? What are you actually getting from those foods for health? So when we think of food and eating, there are so many different diets that are available, whether it's ketogenic or it's Paleolithic or vegan, vegetarian. What I really want to emphasize in the talk with you today is how to eat colorful foods, how to eat a rainbow of different colors that are healing. So one of the things that I focus on is the 7 systems of health. And if you see this body image, you will see that there are different areas of the body that connect to different colors and connect to different foods. And I'm going to walk you through each of the different colors, the body systems, and the foods that connect. So here is that chart. And we're going to start first with red, and we'll go all the way up to white. Now, you know that food is truly medicine. When I came into nutrition many years ago, I found that food was something that we can do on a daily basis to help ourselves heal. And so we can make decisions around food in order to change our lives. So indeed, even from Hippocrates many, many years ago, food is medicine. And I would say that colorful foods are the best medicine. And I don't mean the colorful dyes that you see in processed products, but the natural whole foods. Most people are eating more of a brown, yellow, and white kind of diet. They don't get a lot of color. And as a result, they're missing out on many different nutrients that are important for the body's function. If you look at the scientific literature, what you find is that eating more plant foods leads to less risk of chronic diseases. So less risk of cardiovascular disease, less risk of cancer, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, cataracts, and even maintaining function into one's later years. So plant foods are doing something really healthy for our bodies. And no matter how you eat, no matter what diet label you put on yourself, and how you choose every day, one thing that everybody can do is to have more colorful foods, more of these plant foods, to help to ward off chronic disease. And every time we eat plant foods, we're taking in many different nutrients. So most times we think of protein, carbohydrate, and fat, and those are all very important, just like vitamins and minerals. But most times we don't realize the power of phytonutrients. Phyto means plant, nutrient, the nutrients in the plants. And there are thousands of nutrients in plants. Many of these don't have calories, but the pigment, the color, is changing function inside of the cell in some way that benefits us. So where do you find phytonutrients? What are the many different types of foods? Well, the obvious ones are fruits and vegetables, but then you also have nuts and seeds, whole grains, legumes, and even herbs and spices. All of these different foods contain phytonutrients in a wide array, in a wide spectrum that are doing different things for our health. Now, each food by itself has its own signature, meaning that is it from a plant or from an animal? What is the protein source? What is the identity? What is the macronutrient composition, the protein, carbohydrate, and fat? What are the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the phytonutrients? How does it taste? What kind of effect does it have on our brain, our mood, our neurochemistry? Indeed, food is truly translating into how we feel. And then finally, what are more the subtle aspects of food? The electrons, the protons, the neutrons, the charge of a food. All of these things need to be taken into account when we think of the rainbow properties of foods. Now, many of you listening are probably thinking, Well, she's just going to tell me to eat more fruits and vegetables, and I already know that. So then I would ask, well, why aren't we doing it? Why aren't more people getting enough of these colorful foods? There was a survey that was done, and it was found that 8 out of 10 people were not getting the rainbow. And so when we look at the different colors, what colors do we eat every day? Most people are falling short in at least one of the colors. And the colors that we are falling most short in would be blue-purple. So what I'm going to do is take you through each of these colors and what are some ideas for you on different foods that correspond to those colors and what do those foods actually do in your body. So for a second right now, I want you to think about the foods that you had to eat today. Think about breakfast. Did you have cereal? Did you have yogurt? Did you have fruit? Did you have cheese? Did you have meat? What were some of the foods that you had? Think about the colors and the variety that you can get for breakfast. And then thinking about lunch, what did you have? Did you have a salad with many different colors of foods? It doesn't take much. It's more about the quality. It's about getting the spectrum every time. One of the most fascinating aspects of these colorful foods is that they act as antioxidants in our body, so they protect our body from damage, from the environment. If you think of the environment right now, we live in a very polluted, toxic world. And all of those toxins come in and they create an insult in our bodies. They create stress, they create disease. And many of these plants are helping to protect us from those toxins. Not only that, but many of these colorful compounds go into certain parts of the body. So for example, in our eye, we have a concentration of a yellow pigment from plants called lutein, and also zeaxanthin. We have carotenoids, the colorful plant-based carotenoids found in nature, and when we eat those plant foods, the colors can even come into our skin and protect our skin. And then I think of blue-purple foods. I think of the blueberries and blackberries and those pro-anthocyanidin compounds which come into the brain and help with learning, memory, and mood. So you see, it's not just being an antioxidant. These individual nutrients actually go to certain parts of the body responsible for function. So let's go through the spectrum of foods one by one. And I first want to give you an overview. I think it's very important that you see the foods, that you have a shopping list. And in my book, The Rainbow Diet, I have a list of all the different colors of foods and a shopping list so you can remember what are the different colors of foods, what have I tried, what have I not eaten. So this is the Rainbow Diet Pinwheel. And in every section, I give you some ideas of the different types of colors of foods that you can choose from. So let's start with red. When I think of red foods, I think of foods to help you with inflammation. Inflammation is redness in the body, and redness of foods helps to quell some of that inflammation because of the plant pigments that are helpful. So when you think of red-colored foods, think of anti-inflammatory activity in the body. When I think of this chart and I look at the red, I think of not just the inflammation in the body, but I also think of the immune system. I think of the structure of the body, the physical body, and I think of protein to build our bodies. And even if you think of red meat or a lot of protein like red beans, adzuki beans, different red-colored foods can help to build our structure. When I think of, I also think of iron. Iron helps to, it's a mineral that helps to build our blood, the red blood. So red-colored foods invigorate us, they energize us. So think of that when you think of red-colored foods. So this is a summary of what I just spoke about. the idea that red-colored foods help to reduce inflammation, protect the cells from damage, heal and help the immune system, support the adrenal glands. What are the adrenal glands? They are the glands right above our kidneys that help with the stress response. They help us with fight or flight. So the red is about being reactive and yet being calm and not inflamed. I'll say that again. And being calm and not inflamed. It also fortifies the bones and builds the blood. So again, here are some examples, because many of us are in ruts. I call these food ruts, where we eat the same thing every day and we forget that we have a variety available to us. So if you look in the first column, you'll see fruits that are the color red. If you look in the second column, you'll see vegetables that you can choose from. And when I think of red-colored foods, here are some of the phytonutrients that are in red-colored foods. So I think of lycopene. Lycopene is a carotenoid. It comes from nature. We find it usually in tomatoes, but also grapefruit, watermelon, guava, these types of foods. And it's very important to protect the body, help the immune system. In men, it can help the prostate gland. It can also help to protect against inflammation as it relates to cardiovascular disease. Anthocyanins is another class of compounds that we get from red foods, from things like raspberries and cherries and strawberries and cranberries. The smaller the berry, the more of these compounds that are beneficial to the body. And finally, astaxanthin. Astaxanthin is found typically in shellfish or in shrimp. When I think of shrimp in the pinkish orange color, this is coming from astaxanthin. Now, each of these phytonutrients you can also find in a supplement. So if you felt that you were not eating enough red-colored foods, you could clearly take a supplement that would have these types of nutrients to help your body, to build, to protect the immune system. Red foods are also, they tend to be high in vitamin C. And vitamin C is important for our immune system. It's important for protecting the body. So we see here cherry, acerola. We see also red bell peppers. We see tomatoes, all very high in vitamin C, like some other types of foods as well, like citrus fruits. So when we take in red-colored foods, we get more vitamin C as well as phytonutrients that are protecting our immune system. So what I will do is I'm just going to show you a couple of studies to show you that there is some scientific research to support bringing in red-colored foods into your diet. There are many studies on tomatoes. This one was on tomato juice, showing that when you drink tomato juice, you can help to reduce inflammation that you typically see in people who are overweight or obese. And this is really helpful because inflammation is the reason for many different chronic diseases. So if we can cool our body down with red-colored foods, then we don't have the same chronic disease risk. So tomatoes are an example. And not everybody can do all red foods. Maybe you have a sensitivity to nightshades, or which would include tomatoes, so you have to find another source of lycopene or vitamin C. Strawberries are another type of red food, which are high in vitamin C and also many different phytonutrients. And what this study was looking at was how if you have strawberries before a meal, you can reduce the inflammation that can occur with the meal. So the timing of red foods and these colored foods is important to realize. So if you have nutrients right before a meal, you can actually reduce the amount of oxidative damage or inflammation that can occur if you're eating unhealthy foods. So that's why many times I take my supplements together with my meal to also help protect me in case there are things in my meal that were formed with cooking that would cause inflammation in my body. Beet root. Beet root is another red food that is very healing. We can have it as a juice. We can have it as a cooked beet, where we cut it, we can eat it in a salad or just as a part of a meal. This study was looking at the difference between juice or the cooked beet, finding that both were really beneficial. So if you have it as a juice, it could be more important for helping to reduce fats in your blood that connect to cardiovascular risk. And if you have it as a cooked beet, it could be important for reducing inflammation. Now, that was the red-colored foods. So again, just to do a quick recap, red-colored foods help with reducing inflammation, helping to protect the body from environmental damage. Now we move on to orange. And when I think of orange-colored foods, if I go back to the chart, what I think of is how orange is more about the water element, about flowing and moving and creating. It's about our emotions. It's about whether or not we eat emotionally, or how we create our meals, or how we flow in our body with foods. And if we move along this table and we come to the food section, we see that there can be things like fats and oils. So thinking about things like salmon and fish that are rich in omega-3 fats. And these omega-3 fats help our body to flow and move and our cells to transport nutrients and get toxins out too. I think about nuts and seeds that are high in oils that give us those essential fats that our body needs. And without those fats, we can have an issue with skin, with hair, with nails, with thinking, with mood. Fats are very important to all of our function. And then I think about orange-colored foods. Let's talk about some of those orange-colored foods and what some examples are. There are many in the plant kingdom. So, and again, in the first column, here are some of the orange-colored fruits, things like apricots and blood orange and cantaloupe, mandarins, mango, lots of beautiful tropical fruit choices. When food is grown seasonally in the tropics, it has that feeling of lushness, relaxation. It gives us the juiciness, also the more water we find in these fruits. So they help us to flow. And then we also look at the vegetables, things like carrots, bell pepper, pumpkin, sweet potato, and yam. So when I think of orange food phytochemicals, I think of beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is what makes carrots orange. It's a powerful antioxidant. It can also help with our immune system. It can help to reduce cancer. It does many different things. That's one of the beauties of phytonutrients, is that they do many things in the body. But there is a little bit of a pattern between the colors and the functions. And that's what I'm also calling to your attention. So typically we find beta-carotene in so many foods, things like carrots and sweet potatoes, pumpkin, squash, fruits like cantaloupe and mangoes. And then I also think of bioflavonoids. Bioflavonoids like hesperidin, rutin, these types of things that naturally occur in orange-colored fruits. And these too can be found in a supplement as well. So if you feel like, my goodness, I'm not eating enough orange-colored foods, how can I get these nutrients? This is where I start to think of a dietary supplement, taking a carotenoid supplement with beta-carotene, or taking a vitamin C supplement with bioflavonoids to help us with our capillary health, with our overall preventing damage in the body. And this is a really important thing for reducing chronic disease. So if we look at a lot of these orange carotenoid foods, some of them are orange and some of them are not orange. There is even green that we find. When we look at green foods have orange underneath the green often. So here's a list of some foods that are high in the orange-colored carotenoids. Things like carrots, of course, but also kale. Tomato even has a bit of orange. Spinach, mangoes, pumpkin, these types of foods are all very high in orange nutrients. What's really interesting about orange-colored foods is that they contain these carotenoids that are important for reproductive health. So when I think about women's health, ovaries, the uterus, menopause, for many women, they're going through menopause earlier and earlier in life. They're not as vital, they're not as fertile, but having some of these orange-colored foods can help to delay the onset of menopause, to give one more vitality. And even eating more orange fruits, like an orange, can help to reduce the risk for endometriosis, which is an inflammatory condition of the uterus. All right, so just to do a quick recap on orange foods. When I think of orange, I think of reproductive health, I think of flowing, movement, fats, oils, the fat-soluble carotenoids that help processes like ovulation, like reproductive health, and even help with hormone health. So we'll move on to yellow. If we look at yellow on the chart, yellow is about digestion, it's about the fire element of the body, it's about heat. And so I think of things like the stomach, I think of the liver, I think of pancreas, I think of the small intestine, and how we break food down. And for so many of us, what we're looking for is carbohydrate. What gives us energy? What fuels us? What keeps our fire burning bright? And so when we move over to the food section, typically here I think about carbohydrate. But I think of the healthy carbohydrate, not the yellow carbohydrates like cake and cookies and breads and pastas, but I think about sustainable carbohydrates like lentils and squashes and different legumes and whole grains that keep our energy burning bright. I also think about the yellow-colored foods, which I'm going to talk about now. So when you think yellow, think of how you can burn bright, how you can really take in foods that give you energy rather than taking energy away from you. Many of us are not eating good, healthy yellow foods, of course. Things like a lot of potatoes, things like lots of cheese, processed foods. And so we need to shift into more of these healing, plant-based yellow foods. So things like golden delicious apple, things like pears and banana and yellow bell peppers and ginger. And even in some of the greens, there is yellow underneath the green. So in kale and in spinach, you can also find yellow lutein. So lutein, as I mentioned before, is important for the eye health. It goes into other parts of the body that have fat. So things like breast tissue or the skin, this is all protected from lutein. And you can take lutein as a dietary supplement together with zeaxanthin. Many people have done that, and it can be very protective for skin health and a number of other conditions. So when I think of yellow, I think of metabolism. How do you burn energy? And for some of us, as we get older, we don't burn fuel very efficiently. And we can develop conditions like metabolic syndrome. What is metabolic syndrome? It's where you can have differences in your blood fats. You start to gain weight in the belly. You start to get high blood pressure. So it's a cardiovascular and a metabolic combination of dysfunction. So with some of the yellow foods, like citrus fruits, and some other foods, of course, we can help to bring the body back into balance for metabolism. So this was a study, a variety of different studies here, looking at naringenin. Naringenin is a compound from yellow citrus fruits, like yellow grapefruit, which can help our bodies to metabolize better, can help to ward off some of the diabetic-like activity that can happen in cells that aren't working well. They're dysfunctional. So here is an example of where yellow may not be such a good choice. Yellow potatoes versus purple potatoes. It's better to have purple because of the pigment and the different phytonutrients versus yellow. And when I think of potatoes, if you have potatoes, choose the smaller potatoes because they'll be less glycemic and they'll be more nutrient dense than the starchy, high carbohydrate of the large potatoes. Another yellow food is honey. There are many different medicinal bee products, things like propolis and royal jelly and honey. And so when I think of the fire, the yellow, the sweetness, the joy in our lives, I think, how can we choose sweeteners that are healthy? There are so many artificial sweeteners, synthetic agents in food, and oftentimes that keeps us craving, wanting more things that are sweet. Whereas with honey, honey can be medicinal too. It can be very nurturing and soothing and help with metabolism, in the proper amounts, of course. Now, I want to talk briefly about spices. Here's where some of these spices, perhaps in your kitchen, can create heat in the body, can create better metabolism. So here's an example of a study with saffron. Saffron is a yellow spice that is often added to foods for cooking. Sometimes it's in East Indian food, so with rice. But you can add saffron to your meal, and that can help with a number of the different metabolic syndrome issues that we see. Things like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, obesity, and blood fats that get to be too high. Pineapple is another idea for you for yellow foods. And when I think of yellow foods, I think of how do we burn fuel better? And pineapple is rich in enzymes that help to break down protein and carbohydrate. So if we have some of this pineapple, whether through a supplement that has bromelain, or maybe we have pineapple by itself as a food, we can help to better transform the foods that we take in. This was a study looking at how having pineapple juice helped to break down any remaining contents in the stomach before a surgical procedure. So if you think about it, most of us don't digest well. It's hard for us to transform food. We take in too much food. We get bloated. We don't feel so good. We don't get energy from food. So having some of these very specific yellow foods can help us with transforming our food. Cinnamon, cardamom, saffron, this was another study looking at a combination of these different herbs, these spices. So 3 grams of cinnamon, 3 grams of cardamom, 1 gram of saffron, or 3 grams of ginger with tea. And what they showed was that each of these was good for helping with components of the metabolic syndrome. And specifically, the saffron and ginger were very active in helping with reducing things like inflammation and reducing blood pressure, some of the issues that can happen with metabolic syndrome. I mentioned bananas. Bananas are great as a source of prebiotic fiber, also gives us a little bit of sweetness, and it's also a source of serotonin. Serotonin is in our bodies, in our brain, it acts as a neurotransmitter. Many people call it the happy, the feel-good compound in the brain. So with bananas and plantains and some of the other yellowish fruits, what we see is a bit more in the way of serotonin. All right, so let me just summarize yellow. Yellow, again, is about digestion. It's about breaking things down and transforming it through heat, and also helping our metabolism to work better. And so with some of the yellow foods, and then reducing some of the unhealthy yellow foods, we can find our digestive tract a little bit more in balance. So now we move on to green. Now we're up in the heart. When I think of green, I think of a lush forest. I think of expansion and opening up. And that's exactly what we want to happen in our heart. We don't want to be constricted and closed. We want to be open and feeling really just where we can be free and very expansive in our natures. So if we go back to the chart, I want to show you green. So green is connected to not just the heart, but the lungs. The heart and lungs combined up in the chest here. And then moving across to look at the foods, we see a lot of green foods, things like leafy greens, fresh salads, maybe microgreens, small, immature leaflets of greens that are very nutrient dense. And many of the green foods have common nutrients, and these can all help the heart and our circulation. So let's go into some of the green foods. Of course, there are many green foods in nature. If you look at the fruits in the first column, things like apples, asparagus, avocado, broccoli is in the vegetable category, cabbage, cucumbers, a lot of cooling foods. It's good because when we just talked about the fire and the warming and the burning, now we're talking about the cooling greens. What can just make us feel relaxed, and that's what we want in the heart. So there are many different phytonutrients in green foods. So everything from, you have lutein and zeaxanthin, you have the indoles. The indoles are compounds that are helpful for detoxification and hormone health. You have chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a great binder. It will bind things like carcinogens or cancer-causing substances in food and take them out of the body. It will also be rich in things like folate, vitamin B9, and things like vitamin K. We need vitamin K for healthy blood coagulation. So you see that many of these green foods are important for processes that connect to your heart and your cardiovascular health. There's also a connection between green foods and chelating, or holding on to toxic substances that we may have in the environment that we take into our bodies. Things like mercury, things like arsenic or lead, aluminum. All of these things can come into our bodies and give us lots of health issues, things like neurological issues like headaches or tremors, or even gastrointestinal issues, or even increases in blood pressure. So these green foods tend to bind and take things out of the body. It's great to have something like a dietary supplement like chlorella or spirulina to have concentrated amounts of these green foods to help the body to be more protected. Chlorophyll is one of those compounds that is in all green foods that can help to reduce the amount of carcinogen uptake, can protect the DNA. There's another class of compounds in green foods called nitrates. And nitrates are in the green food, and when we eat the green food, we break it apart, and in the saliva in the mouth, we have bacteria that convert the nitrates into nitrites, which then convert into nitric oxide. So we create this gas through green foods, and this gas is relaxing in the body. Our body makes nitric oxide on our own, but one serving of spinach gives you more nitric oxide than all of what your body can produce by itself. So food is very powerful in giving us that response. If you look at this chart, what you can see is that there are certain foods that are higher in nitrates than others. So things like celery, cress, chervil, lettuce, red beetroot, spinach, and rocket are all very high in nitrates. So if you have circulation issues, you want more, if you've got high blood pressure, these might be foods to start to include into your eating so that you get vasodilation, opening of the blood vessels. These green foods are also important for a process called methylation. When we have proper methylation, this process that is happening in your body all the time, then we have lower amounts of homocysteine. Homocysteine is something that your physician can measure in your blood, and if it goes too high, there is a correlation with cardiovascular issues. So green foods help to keep homocysteine in check through the process of methylation in your body. Now, I do want to mention that the green foods also can be a little bit bitter. If you think of arugula or even some of the different cabbages, sometimes it can be a little bit sharp in taste. And the bitter taste is really important for helping us with our gut function too. So that's why when we take in lots of greens, what we can tend to see is reduced risk of insulin resistance, better digestion, and improved metabolic flexibility, better metabolism. So the green kind of works with the yellow together. And oftentimes there is the yellow inside the green. So getting green foods, you can see, helps with so many different processes. Now, I like avocados very much, and I think that they give us many properties that we need. For example, if you look at the nutrients, what you see is that one avocado gives you about a little bit more than 9 grams of fiber. Most people don't think of an avocado for fiber, but we get some fiber from an avocado, as well as fats, different healthy fats. We know about these fats from the Mediterranean diet and how healing and helpful. An avocado is also rich in potassium. It actually has more potassium than a banana. It's also rich in folate, which is important for methylation. So in this study, I find it a fascinating study. It was done at the University of California in Los Angeles. And what Dr. David Heber showed was that when people ate a hamburger, inflammation went up in the blood. But if he had them eat a hamburger with half of an avocado on it, there was no inflammation after the meal. The avocado protected against the inflammation of the hamburger. So many times it's about how we put together certain foods to create smart, healthy combinations. So avocados, I think, are wonderful in salads, together if you eat meat or in a smoothie. And if you can't get enough green, what you can do is to get green food powders. And when I think of green food powders, they're rich in chlorophyll. And these green food powders would be things like alfalfa grass, barley grass, chlorella, green vegetables like green cabbage, spirulina and wheatgrass. And many times you can find this as a supplement, a green food powder that you can add to your water and to your daily diet. So that's another option. You can add that into your smoothie if you choose, if you like to bring in more nutrient density. All right, so let me just give you a general sense again, a summary of green. There was a lot that I said about green. There's a lot in green foods. So again, green is about cardiovascular health. It's about looking at reducing homocysteine, helping the body to work better and flow in its circulation by opening the blood vessels with nitrates. And it also helps to protect us from things like heavy metals in the environment. So all around very good for cardiovascular health. So that's green foods. Let's move on to the color that most people are not eating, which is blue-purple. There aren't many blue-purple foods in nature, but when they are in nature and when you can purchase them at the grocery store, I would definitely recommend that you do that every time you have that opportunity. Just like I showed you the study on purple potatoes. Purple potatoes are more healing than a yellow potato. So blue-purple is a beautiful color, and it correlates to the brain. It correlates to mood, learning, cognition. And most people, when you ask them, what are you most afraid of with your health? What they say is mental sharpness. They want to be cognitively sharp. They don't want to have any kind of issues with concentration or with focus. So what are some of the blue-purple foods? Well, there are lots of options here, and I'm going to tour you through some of those options. Things like purple cabbage, carrots and cauliflower and broccoli, and even purple kale. What about plums and prunes and raisins? You can even find purple rice that's high in a lot of the phytonutrients that make it purple. So bringing in purple every day is really essential for the brain. And the reason why is because the purple foods, the reason why they're purple is because of these phytonutrients that are very healing. So let's look at anthocyanins. Anthocyanins help with so many different things. Not only do they help reduce the risk of cancer, they're powerful antioxidants, they help to reduce memory loss, they help to control blood pressure. Many of the purple compounds also help with circulation, which can help the heart as well as the brain. When your blood circulation is better, then your thinking is better. Blood gets to the brain, you get more oxygen. There's also a connection with reducing the risk for Alzheimer's disease, which is on the rise in the 21st century. So, foods that are high in anthocyanins are blueberries and blackberries and purple grapes, black currants, and elderberries. The phenolics are another class of phytonutrients, and what we see here is that these tend to be very helpful for reducing signs of aging. So dried plums or raisins, eggplant, these types of things are all high in phenolics. So if you're at the grocery store and you can choose between orange or purple carrots, I would say choose the purple because they're going to be more rich in nutrients, 2 to almost 3 times greater in nutrients than their orange, starchy counterparts. Purple grape juice, just a little bit of grape juice, over time can help to improve thinking, memory, and even mood. And this was shown in a study with young, healthy adults. The purple grape juice helped with reaction time, with attention, and helped them to feel more calm. And in part, the researchers believe that it did that by helping with blood flow and also helping with neurotransmitter balance. Berries. One way that you can get blue-purple on a daily basis is to have some kind of berry. Blackberries or blueberries, these types of berries that are nutrient dense, you find a lot of these phytonutrients in the skin. Blueberries have a lot of literature behind them. And the smaller the blueberry, the more it's stressed in nature. If it's organic, it's even better because then you get more of these compounds that naturally form. Blackberries are something that we find as well, grown in nature, accessible to many people. And what's nice about blackberries is that the compounds in blackberries can cross the blood-brain barrier. So they can also have effects on learning and memory. Okay, well, there's lots to say about blue-purple, but I hope that you get the general sense that blue-purple foods are connected to the brain, connected to cognition. There are many, many, many studies looking at blueberries, looking at blackberries, looking even at prunes, and really showing their medicinal effects. So when you think of blue-purple, think brain. So now we're going to close on white. White is the final color. And when I think of white, I think of moving away from food, cleansing, detoxification, purification. And so some of the white foods that we eat in everyday life can be pretty toxic. Things like white sugar, white flour, or even white salt. And people eat a lot of these foods, and so moving away from those foods can help to reduce the body's sense of being toxic. So there are some white foods, however, that can be beneficial. Things like cauliflower and coconut and garlic. Onions, which are rich in sulfur compounds, can help the body detoxify better, as well as turnips and parsnips, which are high in fiber to take things out of the body. So when I think of white food phytonutrients, I think of things like allicin. Allicin is a compound in garlic that can help with many different things, some of which are heart-related, but then also cleansing the body of fungal organisms or microorganisms or viruses, really helping to support the body and clear it from any kind of invaders. So when I think of garlic, I do think of the Mediterranean diet, I think of how healing and helpful it can be. And when I think of coconut oil is something that's becoming more popular. And if you look at some of the studies on coconut oil, it's often used in detox approaches because it's a quick burning fuel source. It can help to the nerves to work better, which is why it's often used in a ketogenic diet. It can help the gut to heal, and the gut is required for good, healthy detoxification. It's also used as a fuel source for the liver, and the liver is another detox organ. So coconut, buy the best possible kind you can. So virgin, organic oil, and yeah, you can even take it medicinally. There are a number of supplements that focus on coconut oil as a base for some other actives. And again, that primarily is because of neurological health, brain health, and even it's used often as a role, and it's even used many times as its part in detoxification. Okay, so we're at the end of the rainbow. Let me just summarize white. White foods, again, moving away from the spectrum of unhealthy white foods and moving into the spectrum of healthy foods that are white, that can heal your body and cleanse and purify the body. So in this final section, I'm going to give you some tips. Because remember, I asked the question in the beginning, you know that you need more color, but you may not know how to do it. So let's talk about some ways that you can do that in your everyday life. First and foremost, it may be a good idea to track the colors that you're eating. You can do this easily on a piece of paper, just writing down the colors of food as you go through the day. You can also use a rainbow food tracker. This is something that is in my Whole-Detox book. I also have discussion of all these different colors in the Rainbow Diet book. So you can make something like this where every time you have a meal, you just quickly check off the color. You don't focus on the food as much, but you focus on the color. And these colors would correspond to plant foods only. So to be focused on the colorful spectrum of plant foods. So some ideas I would say, and this is what I do even in my own life, is first and foremost, I focus on variety. Remember what I was saying about food ruts and how we get into the rut of eating the same thing every day? We have the same red food. We have the same green food. We go to the store and we get comfortable and we buy the same orange foods. Well, the more that we can bring in variety and we can eat new foods every 3 days, this creates better gut health, better diversity, better immune health. And so bringing in more variety through the diversity of different foods will actually make us stronger and more resilient. So when you write down your foods and the colors, look at what you're eating most of the time. It's been estimated that most people eat something like 5 to 7 different recipes, the same recipes every week. We make the same things without thinking about it. So maybe just try to bring in one new food every week. Something that it's been a long time since you've tried it. Or maybe you've never tried it before. Look up how to prepare it and just see how it tastes. Start to bring in new foods. Because if you do, you can see less allergy, better immune health, less body composition issues, better body weight, and even reduced risk for metabolic issues. Spices. Spices are one way to get variety. And mostly people just use the same spices. They use cinnamon, they use salt, they might use oregano, but they don't really go into all the different spices. So I would say to experiment, and you can bring those into teas, you can bring them into smoothies, you can bring them into stir fries, so many different things that you can bring more spices in. And if you eat meat, it's very important to take spices in the meat before you cook it, because the spices will reduce the amount of damage that can occur with cooking. So spices are very healing. I like smoothies. I like them probably more than juices. Juices don't have all the fiber from a plant or from a fruit or vegetable. So having a smoothie brings in a concentrated amount of plant phytonutrients. So that's one way to get the variety and to change up your smoothies. don't have the same kind every day. Tea is also another wonderful way of getting lots of medicinal compounds, whether it's rooibos or chamomile, mint tea, peppermint tea, chai tea, black tea, green tea. There are so many different teas, and I would say try different ones. Don't just have the same one over and over, but try different ones to get the array of different phytonutrients in that tea. If you have water throughout the day, which I hope you are doing, one way to get more phytonutrients is you can put powders into your water. You can also put actual food and infuse the food with those plants. And it will give it a nice taste, and you'll also be getting some degree of phytonutrients. I also think about soups and taking the time to eat. You know, so many times we focus on what to eat, and we don't focus on how to eat. Eating slower and eating mindfully, really sensing and tasting as you take things in. And if you have a warm soup, this usually tends to slow people down rather than just drinking your food quickly. So be thinking about when you're eating colorfully, you want to live a colorful life. So take your time. Try to really come from the place of mindful eating. And, you know, when I think about the day, the daily pattern of meals, what I advocate in my Whole-Detox book is starting your day with a smoothie, something very colorful, and then for lunch, having something fresh like a salad with protein, and then as you go into the evening, having something warm, because then our digestion is not as strong. And so it may take more to actually burn up the food. So helping our body by having warm meals later in the evening could be more consistent with our body rhythm. And then finally, I'll leave you with this idea of how do we combine foods for synergy? So for example, here are 3 tips for you. If you put citrus and you squeeze lemon juice into your green tea, you can preserve the actives in that green tea. You'll make them actually more potent. And green tea is full of catechins, phytonutrients, that heal the body and help in many different ways. Everything from brain health to metabolism to aging. So preserve your green tea with a little bit of citrus. Turmeric root, which is orange. You can put that into a smoothie. You can put the spice into cooking, a stir fry. Adding a little bit of black pepper and oil can also create a synergistic effect of the turmeric. It could make it even more anti-inflammatory. And then finally, I talked about garlic. Garlic is one of the white foods, the purifying foods, blood purifying. And to get the most out of your garlic, one tip is to crush the garlic clove and to let it sit exposed to air for about 5 to 10 minutes so that it rapidly breaks down into even more healing compounds than it originally had. So those are 3 quick tips for creating more synergy with your plant foods. And I would say, as much as you can, find a colorful tribe. Find people that help you to increase your fruit and vegetable intake. Because it's not easy. It's not easy to be eating these healthy foods all the time. It has to become a lifestyle. It's not a diet that you go on and you go off of. It's really how you think about your life. And if how you eat is how you live, and if how you live is how you eat, finding a tribe that really understands and supports that is so important for an overall healthy lifestyle. So I'll leave you with an inspirational quote. This says, "Don't eat vegetables because they are good for you. Eat them for one reason alone, because they're gorgeous." And they're gorgeous because of all of those beautiful, colorful pigments that you see up above in that spectrum of foods. Focus on the art of food rather than having to think so much about the science and the analytical aspects. Focus on the beauty of these colorful foods, and that'll make you even more nourished. So eat the rainbow, and when you eat the rainbow, you become the rainbow. You let that colorful living and that colorful life out on the outside. So I'd like to encourage you to visit my websites. I have 3 different websites: deannaminich.com, foodandspirit.com, and whole-detox.com. And I have many different downloads and e-booklets and podcasts and blogs that you can read on the website. And I have a number of different books too. I have 6 different books. My last book is called The Rainbow Diet, and my book before that one is on detox. It's called Whole-Detox. Thank you very much.